Alan, first I want to congratulate you on being inducted into the California Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Quite an honor.
Yeah.
I have a few questions I want to ask you about your wrestling career, your background.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, what individual had the greatest impact on your wrestling career?
Believe it or not, I would say my older brother. He used to wrestle with me all through. He wasn't a wrestler, but he'd wrestle with me, and I was always able to dominate the neighborhood kids in wrestling, and so he would always wrestle with me and stuff, so I would look at his yearbook and stuff, and I would see the high school wrestlers at Norwalk High School, and I'd be looking at the league champions and things like that, and I wanted to be a wrestler.
Oh my gosh, your brother. Okay. Who was your wrestling idol or hero growing up?
Probably Dan Gable. I remember them telling me that Dan Gable would, between commercials, would take a deck of cards and he would turn it over, and if it was a diamond, he did push-ups, and if it was a heart, he did sit-ups, and if he did clubs, they do wide angles on it and stuff. And so I started doing that, immediately, freshman, sophomore year, I was doing that. During the commercials, I'd be doing push-ups and sit-ups and things like that, just because I heard Dan Gable did that.
What personal attribute most contributed to your success in wrestling?
My personal attribute,
or ability?
I was always strong. My grandpa always told me his father-in-law was the strongest man in Washington. He was born in Denmark, but his parents were from Sweden, and they said the things he could do, being real strong. And so I could always go into the weight room, and guys would be lifting all summer, and I'd go in and be able to lift more than they would. And it just was a natural strength, I guess, was my best thing I had going for me.
What is the most outstanding memory you have of your career in wrestling?
Oh, I don't know. It's you think about several things. I remember my freshman year I was wrestling. I was at Oklahoma State wrestling. I had to wrestle the NCAA runner-up, Mike R. Jones from Oregon State.
Take that again, my fault. Give me that question one more time, I apologize.
Okay.
What is the most outstanding memory you have from your career in the sport of wrestling?
I would think one of the things was when I wrestled Mike R. Jones, who was the NCAA runner-up from the year before at Oregon State. It was my freshman year at Oklahoma State, and I had him in the quarterfinals, and I ended up beating him in a very close match. It was 4-3, and I remember towards the end of the match, I knew he was going to stand up, and we used to do a thing at Oklahoma State. We'd lock our hands as they came up. So as soon as they stood up, we already had our hands locked, and you never get called. And then you just toss them up in the air, and I turned on the side, and I pretended like I was trying to set him down on his foot. All he had to do was waste about 15 seconds, and I kept doing that, and finally we got near the out of bounds, and I'd throw him down, and of course we'd go out of bounds, and then we'd start over and stuff. And I remember that just like it happened yesterday. So. And then that put me in the semifinals against the returning national champ.
Throughout your, what made you get involved in the sport of wrestling?
I was just playing football even though I'd wrestled all those years with my brother and stuff. When I went out for football that year, it was sixth period, and then you continued with the sport after school. If you didn't go into that, you went to zero period. And then you got out of school an hour early. So after football, I went into zero period because I thought, I won't wrestle. So I'm out in zero period, and Coach Estes, my wrestling coach from high school, he was also our head football coach, and he said, Albright, how come you aren't wrestling? I said, I'm just a football player. And he goes, you won't be if you don't wrestle. Have your gear and be there after school today. And so I was there.
Oh my gosh.
I was there for sixth period that day, so I did zero period and sixth period that day, and then continued to be after, in the sixth period class.
If you had the opportunity to start your career over again, is there anything you would change?
One thing that I always have wondered about, and Hal Simonek was a coach at Cerritos College, And he used to allow us to come over and work out during the summers. He had a Tuesday, Thursday open night and stuff. I always wanted to wrestle for Hal Simonek. I love the man. I mean, he was, and I got a chance to talk to him later on in life and actually tell him, you know, if I had to do over again, I would go and wrestle for you a year. And he had told me, he says, you know, most guys couldn't go and compete at that level as freshmen. They think they can, but they really can't. He said, you could. So he says, I don't blame you. I said, yeah, but I always wanted to wrestle for you. So that's probably one thing I might have done. It is interesting because the only reason I did, I was going to go to Cerritos, but Tresbro came down from Oklahoma State and said, hey, you're the only 58-pounder we have. And if you don't come back, I don't have a 58-pounder. Oh. So I went back. Turned out he had the returning starter, Doug Campbell. He had Jerry Robinson's Jay's brother, who was a CF champ for Mount Miguel a couple of years. And then he had 2 Oklahoma State champs that he recruited. So there was 6 of us at the weight, really. But I didn't know that, you know. So anyways.
In concluding here, what would you like the people to remember about you?
Well, I think, you know, I was, even though I competed hard with everybody, I was friendly afterwards. I've made great friends in the sport of wrestling. And even in coaching, you know, sometimes you can get that rivalry, you can get almost too competitive and and have enemies, you know, and I didn't feel that way. Some of my most competitive people I wrestled against are actually really good friends today, and we've actually became friends later, you know. Dan Lewis, we used to compete in high school against each other, and we started working, I would work at his wrestling camp, and he'd come up and work at my wrestling camp, and we became very good friends. I love Dan. He's a great guy.
Well, Alan, again, I want to congratulate you for your contributions to wrestling, and particularly this special night tonight where you're getting inducted. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored.